I have been radicalized by what I have seen of poverty in my own country, too, Rigoberta, for the children of Kenya also die needlessly of disease and malnutrition. The reason is ultimately the growing of cash crops, such as coffee and tea, which have depleted the land and removed from it the crops that previously fed our people. Consequently, women feed their family white bread, maize flour, and white rice, all of which are high in carbohydrates, but low in vitamins, proteins, and minerals. These realities are contrary to my experiences as a child because my village always had enough nutritious and wholesome food. As an educated adult, the connections among colonization, environmental degradation, and human suffering suddenly became clear to me. It occurred to me one day that if we just planted trees, the fruit of the new trees could provide fruit. The trunks and branches of old trees could provide firewood, and the development of complex and extended root systems could slow down the degradation of the soil. Thus, trees ultimately would heal the land and save the people of Kenya. I am happy that my childhood and my memories of our loving community have given me the inspiration and the strength to stand up and take action with the women of my country.
The ability to organize is key in the fight for justice. The Kenya learned to work together in defending ourselves against the Guatemalan army. We cultivated the support of certain priests, nuns, Indians, and other Indian communities. Although I have become more involved in the struggle, I felt increasingly inadequate. I never lost sight of my goal of helping unite the Indians and Latinos. The justification for our struggle was to erase the effects of cultural differences and ethnic barriers so that we Indians might understand each other in spite of the different ways we expressed our religious beliefs.
I'm glad to hear you speak of religion, daughter.
But believe me, there is nothing noble about the kind of poverty my people and I have had to endure.
She's right about that, I'm afraid.
What I would like to know, Mother Teresa, is why you decided to live with me. Was it to have someone to feel superior to?
People have suggested that. What people say about me is immaterial. Daughter, I went to live among the poor not because of a personal wish or desire. It was my calling, just as your calling is to defend your people. Jesus told me that he wanted me to walk in his vineyard in the streets of Calcutta. And so on the train to Darjeeling in 1946, the missionaries of charity were born. On that day, the Lord gave me my call within a call, to do his work by serving the poorest of the world's poor. I began to wear white sari with blue trim and sandals in order to fit in. I began teaching children how to read by writing at first in the dirt. It wasn't long before I began to receive more help than I had ever anticipated. This is so because the work of God, not mine. Young women came to volunteer their service, and the missionaries of charity continued to grow. The Lord later directed us to create a home in Zion, as well as a leper colony.
I wonder what God thinks about the European missionaries paving the way for their country and wanted to set up shop and nearly destroy Kenya.
Love of riches is the root of all evil.
Yet pardon me for bringing this up, please, but I have read, Mother Teresa, that you have had the doubts about yourself, your mission, even about God's existence.
You have done beautifully, daughter, and have every reason to be joyful in your work. Do not let an old woman's darkness extinguish your light.
You have indeed done beautifully, Wangari. Not only did you establish the Green Belt movement, but you have been active in countless other international organizations. The path towards peace must, I believe, take us beyond the boundaries of our homelands. You have planted trees at home while educating the world in principles of conservation.
When as an adult, I visited the land I have lived on as a child. I searched and searched for a beloved fig tree. I learned that it had been chopped down to make room to grow tea, an act that resulted in the stream drying up where I had played with tadpoles with my friends. I mourned the loss of the tree, and yet it was as if the land had rejected anything but that fig tree. After this experience, I became a member of the National Council of Women of Kenya, which organized and unified women's groups both large and small throughout the country. It became clear to us that the work extended down toward station to democracy. Though I have been arrested many times, I have always taken strength from knowing that the work is more important than myself and that I am only one of many.
The way our ancestors lived before the arrival of the Europeans is also very important to my people. For instance, we still grind our maize the way we have for thousands of years, and it is only by doing so that we have been able to preserve our culture. I recall my grandparents saying of Coca-Cola, never let your children drink that dreadful stuff because it is something which threatens our culture. These things are made by machines. Our forefathers never used machines. Our poverty comes not from our traditions, but from landowners who have stolen the land that was ours for countless generations.
How often are wars caused by illusions that material wealth is the goal of human life? Wanting more than what one needs and then wanting what is not one's to take is the cause of so much pain. I admit I cannot imagine what the indigenous people of Guatemala have endured. but I do understand the importance of struggle and that your people must struggle to have a voice, Rigoberta. I admire the way that you have helped organize your people and brought them together for a common cause. I am glad that you are learning the language of leaders in your life, so that one day soon you can engage in effective dialogue, which many of the time replace violence.
Bertha, I have read your autobiography and I'm strengthened to learn about your dedication to the peace movement so early in the last century. You stood alone in your own time and carved the path for future discourse. Yet I think it is fair to say that people have forgotten about you. Your cause is not fashionable, perhaps. The history books need to include her story, as the feminists would say.
You, Sushi, hold your country together. In a sense, you are like a thread stitching of a patchwork of ethnicities, and before you was your father. Alas, his assassination is further proof that a reliance on military might cannot lead to a peace or peace. My own and I spent our political years as heirs, enriched not only but in experience and impressions. I wanted to be of service to the Peace League, and I thought I could do so most effectively through writing. As I wrote the Wealth and Data, which warned against militarism and the horrors of war, I became a clear understanding of peace and the nature of war. Soon after, I eagerly participated in forming the Austrian Interparliamentary Group of Peace Union in Rome and the Greece Peace Society, the German Peace Society in Berlin. No other cause in the history of the world is more important than the cause of peace in this modern era. I am proud to have been involved in work that laid the groundwork for the League of Nations and later the United Nations. I was certain that the 20th century would end without seeing the human society shake off war. Alas, I was wrong. Yeah, I was.
The war between Iran and Iraq, made possible through U.S. arming of Iraq, left 1 million Iranians and Iraqis killed or wounded, 100,000 soldiers taken as prisoners of war, and 2.5 million refugees. How can war be a reasonable answer to any enduring human problem? I'm convinced that change in Iran must come peacefully from within. And let me also say that freedom and human rights are not perforce in conflict with Islam. The 2009 revolution demonstrated that there are countless faithful Iranians who wish to peacefully transform our nation into a democratic state. I wanted to experiment and hope, and I let myself be carried away with optimism regarding the election of the reformist Mohammad Khatami. Fortunately and unfortunately, as I always say, in the event of this election, the street crowded with idealistic young people. The optimism did not last long, however, because a local newspaper was quickly shut down for violating national security. This caused an uproar among local students, and somehow I found myself in the midst of another political scandal.
I feel that nothing that I've done can compare to your struggles in the world to perform a theocratic state.
I try not to call Iran theocratic, Bertha, which is, to my ears, implies that God is guiding it. When I started my career as a judge, I became the first woman to preside over a legislative court in Iran. But after the revolution of 1979, the religious government took this position away from me, denoting me from judge to secretary. I do not consider such abuses of power to be Islamic in any way. Very regrettably, the Iranian religious leaders today have interpreted Islam as stating that women should not be judges or hold positions with any sort of power over men. Many women like me disagree that this interpretation is of our religion. We must always remember that religious traditions are constantly being deconstructed and reformulated, and in fact, are always in a state of flux and transformation. That is, there is no, nor has there ever been, an Islam, one Christianity, or one Judaism, and never will be so long as human beings apply their own understandings to the interpretation of religious texts. In the last 23 years, from the day I was stripped of my judgeship to the years of doing battle on the revolutionary courts of Tehran, I have repeated one refrain. An interpretation of Islam that is in harmony with equality and democracy is an authentic interpretation. It is not religion that binds women, but the dictates of those who are willing to destroy religious feeling for their own political goals. In this case, the need for men to remain empowered by ensuring that women stay chained to their homes. A belief in the right of women to enter the public sphere and to be treated with respect there, along with the conviction that change in Iran must come peacefully and from within, has underpinned my work, and I remain a faithful Muslim.
Had the United States not sponsored a coup to replace Iran's democratic government with a dictatorship in 1953, we would not be having this discussion. This is what comes from a desire to own what is not ours and from the abuse of the military power.
What is done is done. We should not look back too long. We may lose our courage. What does the word peace mean to you, Bertha?
peace means having a civilized and harmonious society without any conflict.
I quite like the idea of peace. What about you, Mother Teresa?
As far as peace and war go, I leave them in God's hands. Yet though I do not believe that peace on earth is for human beings to achieve, still our efforts reflect God's presence in the world.
Sometimes, I'm afraid, religion can inspire complacency. Buddhism is not conducive to revolution, so it has taken a while to engage the support of the people for the cause of democracy in Burma. My people live in fear of speaking out against the government. We must do our best to lead. We must help them embrace freedom from fear, and we must help them create a government that is worthy of them.
Sometimes I'm not so sure about the value of democracy. Why should we grant the oppressors any rights and privileges? They never cared about any of us. We were valuable to them only because we worked ceaselessly on their fincas and in their factories and homes. And when our life energy were spent in their service, they discarded us as trash. In addition to our souls, they took our land.
The atmosphere in Burma is very tense at this time. We might recognize it, Rigoberta, as the way things were in Guatemala before the end of your civil war. The machinery of the government has come almost to a complete standstill in parts of the country. Vigilante groups have taken charge of local security, but the people are spearheading a movement for discipline and order.
During the Guatemalan Civil War, which lasted for 36 years, more than 200,000 people lost their lives and 50,000 disappeared. The majority of all casualties were of Mayan ancestry. More than 1 million Guatemalan refugees were displaced and hundreds of villages were destroyed at the hand of the state. After the fighting ended, my people put down their weapons and were granted land that had originally been theirs. Although we had a democratically elected government in Guatemala, it took many years of fighting to achieve.
Respectfully, Rigoberta, my religion, Buddhism, advocates nonviolence. And like you, I must stay true to my traditions so long as I believe that they are wise and valuable. Please realize that I'm not alone in this. Brave men and women have moved mountains through nonviolent protest.
Our situations were not alike, Suu Kyi. As the government of Guatemala was pursuing genocide against my people, this was confirmed by the Truth Commission following the end of the war, which also stated that more than 93% of the human rights violations committed during the war were by the state. At first, the victims were mainly students and opposition leaders. However, when the violence was turned upon us, the rural natives, we could not allow our people to be erased from the earth.
Rigoberta, while I'm moved by your story and have no intention to discount your efforts, I must say that I draw great strength from the lives of those warriors who have pursued nonviolent means of dismantling injustice. Nonviolent struggle is a much more complex, varied means of struggle than violence is. The nonviolent struggle is fought through psychological, social, economic, and political means applied by the population and institutions of society. Of course, various methods can be brought to bear: protests, strikes, non-cooperation, boycotts, disaffection, and most importantly, people power.
But so few have an understanding of how to engage in this type of resistance. We are not trained or taught the theories and methods of nonviolence. Alas, what solution is there to the world's evils is not education. But the majority of the world's people are not afforded the same opportunities most of us have been. And even our own education are often woefully inadequate to the topic of the day.
I am indeed fortunate, for a loving hand lifted me out of a lifetime of toil and into a world of possibilities that opened up to me through an education that always had a social element. What is more, although the sweat of my brow has created opportunities, I know I have achieved nothing significant alone. No one on this earth has.
I have found that people are willing to do what is necessary for the enlightenment of themselves and others if they are just given the tools and help to discover their own paths.
The Guatemalan government sent teachers to train our young people to submit to their capitalist ways. We ran them out of town for trying to take our culture from us.
I think you underestimate the value of education in the world outside of your village, perhaps, Rigoberta. But I do believe that there is much to be learned from experience. You can't just read about a thing and know it.
I felt the need to write a manual for those who are inspired by democratic struggles all over the world and wish to replicate the success of progressive movements in their own areas. As a veteran peace activist, I've absorbed a lot of the day-to-day occurrences of oppressed populations. I've seen students march against the atrocities of Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, Guatemala, Peru, and Russia. I've seen people have dedicated their lives to the purpose of advancing freedom and democracy.
A leader must be someone who has had practical experience. You can understand a life only by living it.
That's why we built Hope House. We long to immerse ourselves in the lives of those who dream of helping and learning from them in turn. We fought for cleaner streets and pushed for healthy sanitation codes. It was heartbreaking to see children playing garbage. Many had nothing to eat and so ate what had been left in the streets. All of this was an education at least as powerful as what I had received in school.
The hunger for God's love is much more difficult to satisfy